Hey everyone, welcome to My Favorite Product. We're back with another fun episode and we have Mikayla Stewart joining us today. Hey Mikayla.
Hi, nice to be on.
Yeah, it's nice to have you on. I was really excited that we were able to get in touch about this and make it work. So I'll be honest, I haven't recorded one of these in a while. Really excited to get it going again and publish a new episode. So thanks for bringing the show back to life here in 2024. Um, yeah, quick intro about yourself, Mikayla, your background, your experiences in product management, whatever you want to talk about would be great.
Yeah, so I am currently the VP of Operations at Bit3 Consulting, which is a startup consulting firm for seed to Series A is kind of like our sweet spot. But we really just like working with startups in chaos states and just getting them back on track to that next level of growth, which is my favorite place to be. And then I also do some fractional C-suite consulting as a COO and a CPO through my own kind of consulting firm called Latono. Um, yeah, so I've kind of been in the product space for a few years, starting with working for wallet pass technology companies and in the retail marketing as well. So I really had like a weird start to tech, especially because it was accidental. I had a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations. I was planning
Oh,
on going
interesting.
into security and strategy for my career. So it was really interesting graduating in the pandemic and being like, oh, that's not happening. We need to find something else.
I,
Yeah, I just
yeah,
kind of found that I fit in really well with tech. So we're seeing where it goes.
that's cool. Yeah, I think if we've had X number of guests on the show, they've had X number of paths into, whether you want to call it product or tech or entrepreneurship, wherever they are today. So just another one. I hear your story, which is great. Another thing about product that I think is really interesting, and I'd love to hear more about this. You seem to light up a little bit when you said the chaos state that you're helping companies with. What attracts you to kind of making sense of the chaos state?
So my favorite, actually, the reason I did my degree in security and strategy is because it's all about problem solving. It's you're going into this like really chaotic kind of world of like everything's in so many different spots. There's so many different puzzle pieces to line up. And not everyone is really good at that. They want to just be able to go in and do their job and leave. Whereas I love being able to tear it all apart, find the root cause of the problem, and let's build it back up from there. So that's why I really love the chaos state of startups, of where you have a great product, but maybe you're not getting traction or you're not figuring out, how teams work together and getting your people really being able to communicate. I find especially if you have like a really good co-founding team and then you bring in someone that nobody knows, that someone never really knows how to work with that team. And that team also doesn't know how to bring in new people, which is really key for growth. And so like being able to help startups figure that out and like translating ideas into like real pieces of product that your users actually want and like reminding you of like your product isn't the solution, it's a solution, and if you can't tell me what problem it's for, it's not really going to be anybody's solution. So I just really love being in those kind of places where you can just really help founders find their core vision and the core reasoning and bringing them back to that. It's just so fun.
Yeah, yeah, and there's so many different, it sounds like from what you were saying, there's so many different angles to approach it. I mean, the product market fit, the process, the people, chaos could live anywhere, I guess, or everywhere in some cases. And good that you and your team at Bit3 are helping there. Okay, well, I've held the audience in suspense long enough. Tell us about your favorite product. What's the name? How does it help you? What do you love about it?
Yeah, so if anyone ever looks on my LinkedIn or really anywhere exists on the internet, I am constantly talking about ClickUp. And I have been using it since 2018. The company was founded in 2017. So I was like pretty close to an early adopter. I used it for university. I used it for my household. I use it in every single job I ever touch. I have to find a way to like bring in ClickUp. And it's really just another project management tool. That was really like how I found it, was just being able to break down like the papers I was writing and the coursework I was doing and just giving myself like a schedule and a task list, because before it was always write everything down on a sticky note and cross it off. A lot of people use other things like Monday or Asana,
Mm.
Jira. They're all kind of in the same space, but there is something about ClickUp's desire to make everything all in the one space that just puts it over the top for me. And whenever I bring it into startups, I always have startups start with ClickUp because everyone can exist in the same platform. And when you have that like mitigation of like, we're not in 19 different tools to do our jobs, it's so much easier to keep everyone on the same page, which is so critical for that startup growth. Um, and so I usually have like a nice little setup that I start all my startups up with of like building out your lists and your spaces and just making sure everyone's really oriented in like what level they need to exist in. You can embed basically everything into it. So when you have like a folder of like, okay, product is going to be working over here, you can embed your Figma, you can embed your Miro, you can actually work on them in ClickUp. You don't have to go out,
Huh.
which is really useful when you're trying to like just present to a team of like, okay, like here's our upcoming sprint. Here's where we started with like the product vision and Miro, or even using ClickUp whiteboards sometimes because they have that as well. And then you can go into Figma, show the hi-fis, and then you go to your ClickUp task list to talk about how we've broken that down. And so having everything all in that same space, just
Without having
switching
to
between
leave, right?
tabs
It's all
without
embedded
having to
in this thing.
leave.
So yeah.
Yeah. And you can chat, you can do comments, you can connect your Gmail, like everything exists in this one space. And it's just so incredibly convenient to keep it all there. And they have dashboards, which I love because being able to report on progress, like as someone who does Scrum Mastering a lot, it's super useful. And like you can get that high level vision across the company when everyone's existing all on the same platform of how is everyone doing towards our goals? How are we
Mhm.
aligned on this company vision? You can have that exist in goals. So they have a lot of features, but like once you know how you would be using all these features anyways, but you'd be using them across 20 plus different apps. Now you're just using them in one. You don't have to keep signing up for all these different platforms that have that like one specific feature you're looking for. So it's been an incredible journey using this app and seeing how they push stuff out all the time. And you're like, oh, I can finally get rid of this other tool now that they have the feature in ClickUp.
Yeah.
So it's
So a
really
mini
fun.
version of the iPhone, right? I mean, the iPhone has taken out so many other different apps and technologies, like just your calculator, right? Or a level now, if you want to find make sure something's level in your house, you pretty much can find it on your phone. Sounds like ClickUp's doing that for office productivity or team productivity. That's very cool, and it's interesting you say that because I'm actually dealing with this problem as we speak. We didn't plan this. We didn't script it. Um, and I've seen it now at two companies in a row, which is we have a large development team that is in kind of your Atlassian suite. And for collaboration, it's typically Confluence. And there's the revenue facing teams at the organization, also large in numbers, who are using something like Notion. And I've never really delved into whether it's a licensing issue, aka a pricing issue for us or costs. But not everyone has access to, actually no one has access to both things. Maybe I am, maybe I'm the only one who has access to both, but it's hard for me to publish something like our ideal customer profile because if I put that into Notion for the sales team and for marketing, our developer team is going to want to see it at some point and go, I want to know who I'm building for. So it sounds like I'm asking you a very leading question here, a loaded question, but it sounds like ClickUp can solve for that in a few different ways.
Yeah, their docs feature is actually beautiful. I prefer it over Notion. I used to be a really big Notion user,
Yeah.
and then ClickUp came out with their docs. I want to say it was like 2020, and I immediately latched onto it. It's so much nicer as a product person to be able to do something like my product requirements document, who I'm building these features for, who I'm envisioning our key users to be, competitor research, to just be available to everyone on the team
Yeah.
because everyone's going to need it. I want my developers to understand why we're building this feature. I don't want them to just see the end user stories. I really want them to pull back because that envisioning helps them technically understand how they should build it because they know the why. And marketing needs it to be able to figure out how do we pivot this? How do we fit it into our product messaging and all these key things? And then it also just helps executives to really understand why we've chosen this feature as priority. And it helps them figure out like how does it match with our key overarching business vision. And so having it all available to everyone, and you can have it in these key spaces, everyone can access it so easily without having to dig for it because the search feature is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's so much nicer. And I find, especially in teams that are building in that next kind of growth phase, they really need access to all of this. Everyone needs to be on the same page and have the same messaging. And if you have too many places to put it in, you'll end up forgetting to put it somewhere, and some
Yeah.
team didn't get the message.
Yeah. You also mentioned dashboards before, and I'm interested in how that some of the positives there is transparency. We're making this available to everyone. I'm guessing there's performance statistics in those dashboards. I think in the real world, it can be dangerous, right? For motivation and for others to, be able to see some of those numbers and maybe, take it the wrong way. How have you found that to work in terms of organizing dashboards? I think it's really important for everyone to kind of be looking at the same stuff and having the same overarching goals, but I don't know, how have you managed that effectively?
Yeah, so I found in some teams, it really matters about what story you're telling with those dashboards. So they're very customizable. It's very much of like, you go to like create a new one, you kind of have to think of like, okay, who's my target user within the corporation of who's going to be looking at this? What's the info they need to see? And you really want to tell that like analytics story of
Yeah.
like, okay, we want to look at maybe how are things moving through the pipeline? And you can create your dashboard based on like the status of all the tasks in boards. You can look at workload performance so you can see whether or not, a couple of people maybe are taking on too much, and they're overworked. And you can maybe see like some imbalances in teams based on they have a whole bunch of things assigned to them, but there's only 3 people. And so they're actually not moving very fast through it.
Yeah.
Um, and it really helps you figure out resource management and all these different pieces. But I think it actually gives a lot of teams like this sense of pride, because when you can show this like quarterly report of like, guys, you accomplished all these different features over the last quarter.
Yeah.
And and I always like to tie it with like product analytics as well. So usually what I'll do is I'll have a mixed panel tab embedded into ClickUp. And when I'm showing to a company, here's your quarter dashboard, I'll also have like a mixed panel one queued up of like, as we completed these features, we actually saw this progress in the product, so that people can really tie some tangible reactions to the work that they did. And even if, they thought something was a waste of time or like, why did we build this? If you can then show them the exact translation into the product of like, we built this because we then saw this.
Yeah.
It just really helps align people with that vision and keep them motivated.
Right. Building it wasn't the goal, right? It was the customer's reaction to it or acceptance of it and the value they get
Yeah.
out of it. So yeah, that's been a struggle of mine too. Gosh, you'd be a good salesperson for ClickUp because you're solving a few of the problems I've had, which is taking, Pendo dashboards and Jira stuff and saying, yeah, we built a lot, but also here's how it was reflected in the customer's behavior. And those usually, are all kind of funneled out into a PowerPoint deck, whereas this would be a living, breathing document, which sounds, or a living, breathing dashboard, which would be much more effective. So cool stuff. I'm going to ask you the hard question now that we ask everybody. Anything with ClickUp that you'd change or that you might be looking for, waiting for these days?
Oh, I'm definitely waiting for whiteboards to get better, because I love Miro and I will never fault Miro for existing the way that it does. But sometimes it's kind of a nightmare as like a product person to have to go somewhere else to do my brainstorming and then retype everything out. And like in ClickUp, they have a pretty good whiteboard system. You can translate your little flow diagrams into tasks, but there's still just something quite missing in terms of like how you use it compared to Miro or Mural that still make them the better app. And so I still haven't left them. And I'd love to be able to be put in a spot where I don't have to still have something over there. because I love having all my product planning in one space, and because I want everyone to see the thought process that product is doing. And I want to create that visibility, which as soon as you have something in a different platform, you've lost it. Because no one's going to check all the 19 different places that you do your work to figure
Right.
out why you do things the way you do it. So I think that's probably one of the key ones. I would have said time tracking until about a month ago when they came out with it.
Kudos to the
Um,
R&D team over at ClickUp. Yeah. They're a month ahead of
um,
you. Yeah.
yeah, and the AI I think could still use some improvement. Right now, it's very much of just kind of a chat GPT within ClickUp. And I always applaud companies for going, we need an AI strategy. Let's just try something and see how it works. But I think it could use some more iteration. And I think you can see that because I don't think it's getting as much traction as they wanted because they're marketing it a ton of like, did you guys know you have AI? Which makes me think the customers don't know they have AI. Um, and I even have some spaces because I make new ones for all of my clients where it actually doesn't tell me about ClickUp's AI feature. I don't
Huh.
know it's there. I only know it's there because in one of my other spaces, it is there. So it's really interesting how they sometimes there's almost just too many features, and so you can't find them all.
Right.
But I'd really love for them to find a better way to put that in front of the users.
And make them aware, it sounds like as
Yeah.
well. Any particular use cases where you think, gosh, AI would be a perfect solution or, complement to this?
Yeah, I think optimizing how to do some of the tasks. So I always create tasks that like, oh, I have to make a product requirements document for this next feature, this next product for this startup. I have to do some competitor research. While I can go and like into that task and create the document and then like have AI write it for me, it would be so much easier if I could just like mark something on the task of like, I just want AI to give me a draft
Mm,
and give it that initial agent.
yeah.
Or having it linked to like a status thing of like, if I set this to in progress, maybe AI just spits out a draft and attaches it to the task. These are all things that are definitely possible, but they have to spend the time to want to build that type of work.
Yeah.
And you can always have it then once you have an AI draft, it gets triggered to in review, and then I get put on my daily list of like, hey, you should go and look at this before you mark it as done.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I think things like that would be really cool, just to really see how far they can take it.
Yeah, it's a great example. I mean, I've been had somewhat of a I don't know, I've gone against the grain a little bit with AI in some cases where I feel like you see companies try and push it into their product because everyone else is doing it and they don't want to, they don't want to have that checkbox on the competitive matrix. But yeah, for instance, I worked at a health and wellness company where we had 13 user journeys that we could assign to people or recommend to people. And like stop smoking, eat better, sleep better, things like that. And we tried to incorporate AI so that it could recommend the next journey. But when there's only 13 of them, it's not like Spotify recommending a song to me. There's only, there's a very concise menu. So I think AI was probably over engineered at that point. Just I was thinking as you were talking about your use case, which makes a whole lot more sense because it's more generative and building something out and saving time.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think there's a lot of opportunities for it. It's just a matter of thinking less about, oh, we need an AI strategy, and more about how does it actually truly help our users
right.
and where are those spots. And those are the key pieces that not everyone wants to take the time to do. They just want to check that box.
Yeah.
But I feel like ClickUp has really shown over the years that they care about what helps their users. And so I think they just kind of need to recenter and think about that a bit.
Great feedback. My last question for you is how has ClickUp changed your thinking, your approach to product management, or any of
Ooh,
the roles you might assume? I know you're fractional COO as well.
yeah, it has really changed the way in which I've thought about the product development process.
Oh, interesting.
So I've always been very like a 0 to 1 type of product manager. I very much start with just a whiteboard of like, okay, what's the problem I'm solving? What are all the ways I can solve that? And usually you do it in a whiteboard or even just a sketchbook. And being able to think more logically of how this translates all the way through the pipeline and keeping it all in that one space of and coming back to those different iterations. Because I found before I was using it for product management, I would do it in my sketchbook and I would draw out all the different flows and I would just pick one and I'd be like, all right, this is what we're going to. And then you never come back to the other ones.
Yeah.
You never really rethink of like, maybe that wasn't the right way to go, or like maybe there's different pieces I could pull. But by having it all in the same space, and when I'm presenting it to dev teams, they can see my thought process of how I got to where we are today. And we go back through some of those initial ideas. And it comes out of like, why didn't we try this piece? And I'm like, that's a great point. I don't know why we didn't. Why don't we try
My mind
it?
moved on, and then we all just moved on with it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it really helps kind of bring you back to some of those initial ideas and getting more brains on it. And I find I love groupthink, especially when everyone thinks differently. When you have a developer, a designer, a product person, everyone approaches things so differently. You can get some really challenging ideas and conversations going. That then when you have this big list of options, people are like, well, why don't we try that one? What's wrong with it?
Right.
And I feel like it's a really great way to keep things going in a much more iterative fashion.
Yeah.
Which is what I love about startups, is moving fast, moving quickly, and figuring out what's hitting and what isn't, and throwing it out as soon as it isn't. But still kind of coming back to it of like, maybe it'll hit now. I just kind of really love those pieces.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a theme here in that it sounds like, which is empowering the engineering teams or engineering team, right? One about, hey, here's my thought process. Here's some of the ideas that I may have cast aside, and just not disregarding them, right? Allowing them to be part of the actual application, right? And what they can see, maybe glom onto. And then also what you had said before, around the why, right? Here's why we're building these things. Maybe it was from customer research, competitive intelligence, but all of that's there if they want to go and find something that's beneath the actual story itself or the requirement. So that sounds really powerful, because I do feel like that's a gap that a lot of teams struggle with, which is, again, empowering or even just informing engineering teams around some of the other stuff that's going on.
Yeah, I love the transparency because it helps everyone see the progress, feel involved, feel a part of it. And when you're building it, when you're selling it, regardless of where you are in the product, if you have that holistic view, I feel like you just enjoy it more.
Yeah.
You're not in this like quiet little silo of like, I do this ticket, I mark it done, I move on. I do this ticket, I mark it.
Yeah, no.
And I just find that tech thrives when everyone's excited by it.
I like that. That might be the title of this one when we go on here. I like that a lot. All right, well, I know we're over time, so I want to be respectful of your time, but before we close out, anything you want to plug, Mikayla?
Yeah, so Bit3 is going to be launching kind of like our studio of our own personal projects, because we're all tech nerds, and we love delving into it. And our first one that's coming up is called Player 2. So it's an AI Siri for when you're playing video games, and you can basically just quickly, as you're in the middle of the game and you're like, I don't know what to do next, you can be like, hey, Player 2, what do I do here? And it'll let you know and help you keep moving through your game, which we're really excited about.
That's great. Every once in a while, us product people need to go build stuff too, right? And roll up the sleeves. Very good. Well, Mikayla, I can't thank you enough for being here. This was a really fun conversation, and thanks again. It's great to learn from you.
Thanks for having me.